Our first speakers this morning are Karl and Jonas Hällström. Karl is a partner in the Global Philatelic Network, a GB collector and author. He is perhaps best known for his famous card index and spends time at the Royal researching auction catalogues to add information to his index. He was awarded the Taplin Medal in 2006. Jonas signed the role of Distinguished Philatelist in 2016. He is currently chair of the Royal's Publications Committee, and he's a philatelic bibliophile. He is also an author and publisher. Norwegian classics by George Stormer, published this year, being the latest, and this includes lots of auction catalogue information. I'm looking forward to their presentations on stamp auction catalogues.
Thank you, James, for already introducing myself, Jonas Hällström, together with Karl Lewis. So we don't need to further introduce ourselves. There is more information to find on this slide if you need it. The slides will be made available for everybody after the festival, I have been told. So you don't need to read everything on the slides. I will come back to the slide concept after this slide. Why have Karl and I been asked to do this presentation about the stamp auction catalogues? Possibly because somebody believed that we had something to say. So Karl and I, we really had to find out how to address this subject as the first note for this festival. And we have tried to divide it in a few parts. I will try to first establish some links to the early collecting, to the foundations of the hobby, because I believe that where we are today, it is a retrospective going back to the first period in philately. And I will come back to that in my second presentation, which is, as you can see here on this slide, divided in three parts. I will establish the first collecting context. Karl will then give a retrospective about auction catalogues. And then I will come back again to talk about the future and where we are possibly now and how we perceive the future going forward. And at the end, we will try to open up for further questions and discussions that we actually achieved anything with our presentation. We invite you to ask questions. I mean, we have no problems if you want to interrupt along the presentation. We have 90 minutes in the program. If you want to interrupt with any question, please do that. If not, during the presentation, we can open up for a discussion and dialogue after the presentation. And not least, also, we want feedback. This is the first version of this presentation, and we can improve it. So don't hesitate to give us feedback what we possibly should cover or not cover next time going forward. Okay, why is it important to go back so long time in history to the 1860s and 1880s in philately? Because we believe that very much of the battle in philately, which was visible 1860s to 1880s, is still applicable. Perhaps the same nature of conflicts, but in new characters. I mean, 160 years later, obviously we have new possibilities using facilities for auction and auction performances. So this presentation will not only be a presentation about stamp auction catalogues, we need also to possibly touch base on the industry itself and how the stamp auction catalog is used in the industry. You cannot talk about catalogs without at least briefly touching to what an auction is. Of course, it is used to something, in fact. Secondly, I want to say some of the slides are very much filled with text and content. Please don't start to read it and lose what we want to say, possibly verbally. You will get all the slides. You will be able to read them comprehensively when you are in your home later on. So please try to find out and follow what we want to say with the support of the slide, which is more comprehensive in text and content. We want this presentation to also circulate independently without the saying of us. And to do that, they need to be sometimes more comprehensive than we have time to talk about during the presentation. Okay, Let's start here in the 1860s. Did you know that it was actually a battle in philately at that time? The battle was between what later has been defined as the French school and the English school in philately. And to be very brief, the debate was very public. It went on in the then journal The Philatelist, and it was published quite openly in between the different sides in this school. And the battle was about how scientific, how complex should one collect stamps in the beginning of the hobby. The French school represented a scientific angle of collecting stamps, meaning that they should be explored by varieties, perforation, shades, papers, etc. By the English, they thought that no, that is not important. Look at the stamp album. If the space in the stamp album is 24 by 36, cut the stamp to shape so it fit the square. And we should be aware of this because I am certain that this still has effects in today when we judge condition and quality, why things possibly evolved like they were in the beginning. Of course, there were some English scholars and philatelists who did support the French school, and they did it openly. The man who we used to address the French school is this guy on the slide here, Legrand, and he was, of course, a French, as you can see by the name. But as stamp collecting at this time were perceived as childish, he didn't write all the things in his own name. He used a pseudonym. He was Dr. Magnus because he was a medical doctor. So to avoid that many of his friends thought that he had a childish hobby, he wrote under his pseudonym Dr. Magnus. And he was, of course, the first one taking these scientific steps in philately. One game changer for the further development of the hobby was the publication of this book, published by Woods here in England, 1867, and it was published together with Pemberton, who we all know was one of the fathers of philately. He was very important for the foundation of the Royal Philatelic Society London later, the Philatelic Society London by that time. And this book was the first publication which actually has made very much importance for how the hobby evolved. This was a pamphlet, not what later issues of this book was, namely a catalogue with more thick and more developed content. But still, this first version classified stamps by shade, watermark, and perforation. And this was a pamphlet, a handbook, which was a game changer for the further development. This war I was talking about took a culmination 1868. Pemberton, who was involved in the book, in the handbook published, he actually wrote comprehensively, extensively in the Philatelist about the French school versus the English school. And the debate was also involving some others. One who was very heavily involved was a pseudonym used by Pendragon. And Pendragon, he used a pseudonym because he was heavily criticizing the French school in philately. It proved later by Pemberton that Pendragon, he was actually a collector following the French school. So he was acting publicly as a devil's advocate. He was talking against something he actually didn't share, but he was collecting himself following the French school. And this is an asymmetry I can see still possibly sometimes are applicable in the industry today, and I will come back to that later. So if you are interested, I share with you in the slides this debate about the French and the English school in philately, and you can read this debate extensively. What I want to say also in this context is that during this time, societies were formed in Paris and in New York, but they were not so long, they were very short-lived at this time. Only in England, where both the industry developed strongly, the collecting developed strongly, and of course we founded this fantastic society we are hosting today's Crawford Festival with. And this is some of the backgrounds in that regard. And already from the very start of this society, what we are doing these 2 days together and are doing here at least 2-3 times a month over the season, to have a meeting format where we want to spread knowledge about philately, to talk about philately, to publish philately, etc., etc. That has been the key factors for this society to be established. And still, the same objectives are relevant for this society. And this is what it is about. So this was a foundation for where the hobby were the first 20 years. It was a battle how to collect, and it was lately developed to something where the French school got the right, and this is still applicable for how we collect, at least today. But meanwhile, a lot of things happen related to auction catalogues, and Karl will now take over and give a retrospective in that regard. And some of the information and data here is deriving from Brian Birch. Brian Birch is one of those who really have allocated most of his life to researching the history of philately, publishing a lot. His bibliophile companion, his digital work about philately and history of philately, is now more than 12,000 pages, available for free on internet. And thanks to Brian's research, we can at least give some background information starting here. So, over to you, Karl.
Thank you, Jonas, for guiding us into the past, into the pioneer years of philately. And just to give us an impression about philately in these days when the first stamp auctions were conducted. So the first ever auction devoted to philately was held by John Walter Scott in the United States in 1870, and in London also by John Walter Scott in 1872. We then saw a big time gap, and only as late as in the 1890s, many more countries saw their first stamp auctions. The most complete run of early philatelic auction catalogues, as you may know, is nowadays housed in the British Library. It would be fantastic if these early catalogues would be available to the public digitally on internet. Perhaps we will see it one day in the future. The first auction in the United Kingdom by John Walter Scott in 1872 realized the then already incredible high amount of more than 250 British pounds. This was a salary for a normal worker for many, many years. Catalogue descriptions at the time Catalogue descriptions at the time were extremely short. A step forward were illustrations accompanied with the auction catalogue. But this was not seen before 1886 by the Scott Stamp and Coin Company, with a single photo plate of illustrations of the key stamps offered in that auction. In the United Kingdom, the first illustrated stamp auction catalogue was that of Vantham, Bull and Cooper sale number 38 in February 1894. Let us shed some more light on the descriptions in these pioneer years of 1860, 70, 80, up to 1910. In these early pioneer auction catalogues, the stamps were simply described with the face value. You could be lucky if the year of the issue was given, but it was mainly given only the face value, the color, the postmark, if it was used. In these early days, only mainly unused or mint stamps were offered. Sometimes there was one word or two words given to the quality. And very important, they always mentioned the number of stamps in the lot. But this is very clear because the auction catalogues simply reflected the way of collecting in these days and years. And the normal collector, the normal way of collecting was one of each in a printed album. So why describe more than simply what stamp we have and what space it would fill in your one of each printed stamp album? Examples of an early auction catalogue is this from Plumridge & Co., London, even as late as 1980. One or possibly two photo plates attached to it and very short and rough descriptions. An amazing example of shortest descriptions is this world rarity of 1840, the Tuppence Blue Plate 2, which was, I must say, unfortunately, was a block of 84 offered by Venton Bull and Cooper. And the description of this world rarity consisted of simply 4 or 5 sentences. No illustration. The illustration is another photo which I was able to find later on, just to give you an impression what we are talking about in a very short auction lot descriptions of 4 or 5 sentences. The block, by the way, is the famous Mackay block. Sold or not at the time as a block of 84, given a hammer price of 210 British pounds, the block of 84 was then split into 2 blocks of 35 and one of 14, which you nowadays find in the Phillips collection in the National Postal Museum, the left-hand vertical block of 14. And what is interesting that the descriptions of the block split in 3 parts was only 2-3 sentences, no illustrations, but we still had world rarities. By the way, the largest surviving multiple today from this block of 84 in private hands, guess, what is the largest multiple surviving from this block of 84? Any more assumptions, proposals? I tell you, the largest one in private hands is a block of 6. A block of 6. And interesting to know, also for expert committees, the block was originally without gum. So if you have Tuppence Blues, Play 2, unused, from the 7 rows, be very careful if the gum is original or not. By the way, from this block of 84, the largest block surviving until 2012 in Chardwell collection was a block of 15, which was split a few days after the Chardwell sale in 2 blocks of 6 and 1 of strip of 3. Another example of the quite short descriptions at the time was this famous block from the Tuppence Plate 1, the block of 24, cut from the Dublin find. The auction description was simply 3 sentences, that there were the lower 2 rows with inscription and plate number. No illustration. The illustration was found later, just to illustrate what world rarities we are talking about and how short and rude they were simply described in these days. And by the way, this, you cannot read this, but these are 2 sentences, and this was a VR 1 penny black block of 12 mint offered with 2 sentences, no illustrations. And this was in Plumridge in December 1901. The first name sale, so what you see today, we see many name sales. This is the trend of today. But the first name sale of a collection that we saw in 1865. This was a collection of Joseph W. Elb, although only his initials were used. M.E., Monsieur Elb, and this auction was held by Pierre-Marie Mahet in Paris. The first clear name sale was in New York in April 1893, which was the Découpé collection. And the first name sale in the United Kingdom was run by Sotheby's, Wilkinson and Hodge in 1873, named as the M. Clausius collection. Next, a funny double page. The first double page in an auction catalog we found was this of Plumridge in December 1918. It was an Edward VII's 1 penny red with only the overprint official, omitting either Army official or IR official, Inland Revenue official. And interesting enough, the Royal Certificate of 1918 did not say it is either an IR official with IR omitted or an Army official. And look, this funny small description on the right side. This is a photo from the double page in the Plumridge auction catalog saying simply, with official only, see photo and certificate of the Royal Philatelic Society, a unique stamp. I think it couldn't be shorter described. But these were the way of presentation philately in these days, in these early days. Now we jump into the presents. And this is a typical double page, at least for our company, for our group, where we offer a rarity today. So, and I will go into the deep and in the background of this presentation design with my next slides and explanations. And Jonas, you named it the Louis and Michelson auction lot presentation concept. But I would like to tell you a story, and this is, I think this is very important. At least it was important for Dieter and for me. And when we bought the companies in 2012, now 12 years ago, we analyzed, Dieter and I, we analyzed the stamp market. And the question we wanted to be answered was, what was in the past? What is today, and what will be the driving force for stamp collecting in the future? And I would like to tell you a story. I said, what was the driving force for stamp collecting in the past? What do you think? When did we see in the world the largest number of stamp collectors? Who guess? 1955. 1955. Okay, any more?
Pre-First World War.
We don't know. No one ever counted the number of collectors in these days. But James, I would agree more, let's say between 1900 and 1920. It was everyone was collecting stamps. And the usual way of collecting was the pre-printed album with all the spaces. So you had from Afghanistan and Bechuanaland and Colombia and Denmark, you had all the spaces for one stamp. We call it the one of each collection, the one of each printed stamp album. So the only goal was to fill every gap. So, and when the stamp collector finally opened his stamp album, our result of our analysis was he started a journey which he thought he would never do in real when he opened his stamp album. He started a journey around the world. And in these days, 1900, 1920, the normal stamp collector could never expect to go or to see the Chinese wall in China or the pyramids in Egypt. So this was a journey. They started a journey around the world which they expected they would never do in real with the help of their stamps when they opened their album. But what happened then? Latest, in the 1980s, we had the mass tourism, we had the long-haul flights. You could go everywhere. When I would show my friends a stamp from Mauritius, simply a stamp from Mauritius, I'm not talking about the post office Mauritius, let's say from Mauritius, and I would say, hey, look, this is a stamp from the paradise island of Mauritius. There is no fascination anymore because he would answer, oh, Karl, I have visited Mauritius with my wife last year. So this driving force, the journey which you think you could never start in real, this driving force of stamp collecting, the one of each stamp collecting, was no longer there. So what was the change? What was the break? What is the driving force today? Postal history. Exactly. But let me go a bit more into deep. So we have the postal history collectors. We have the social history collectors. I know you name it now different, but let's say social history collectors. Again, when the collectors of today, when we, including me, when we open our stamp albums, then again, we start a journey which we think we will never do in real. But this is no longer a journey around the world. Now it's a journey into the past, a time travel into the past. We see ourselves on the packet going from Bombay to Suez, or crossing the Atlantic, or being on the coach and fighting against the Indians who want to rob our mail, whatsoever. This is what we are doing. We're starting a journey which we believe or sure we will never do in real. Now it's a journey into the past. And this, if this is or was the driving force of stamp collecting today, how do we reflect this in our auction catalogues? If we want to promote, if we want to market stamps, philately, postal history, social history, we have to find a way, we have to find answers to get stamp collectors, new and old stamp collectors, motivated to collect stamps. So the result was, first of all, an aspect which I had not mentioned before, the provenances. Provenances also turned out for us, despite the journey into the past, the time travel, but the provenance also was a key pillar for us, which emotionalized an item. Knowing that a certain item has been already in the collection of A and B and C and D over the last 80 years means this was fascinating to have this item in my collection, which already was owned by Burroughs or Seymour or Liechtenstein, whosoever. So provenances got a much, much more important fact for us in presenting high-end philately in our today's auction catalogues. The next thing was very well received from our customers, that we try to visualize the provenance. We're starting to visualize the provenance in using the portraits of the former owners and collection of an item. Not only the last sentence or the last row in the description, but also visualizing the provenance of an item, so that if you follow an auction on internet, you see it only for, let's say, 10, 15, 20 seconds, but you can immediately realize, oh, this was already owned by 2, 3, 4 important collectors before, and you possibly get another emotion, another interest in a certain item. In addition, I mentioned before, it's a time travel into the past, a journey which we'll never do in real, but to feel the emotions, to feel the interest, we started to accompany or to add illustrations from the time an item was sent or used. So, for example, this is possibly went from a city where this important building was standing. So our concept was that, let's say, if you see on TV or on internet illustrations, photos or whatsoever from the past, let's say 100 years ago, you only see black and white photos, more or less. So this means we started with an illustration to give the collector an entrance door to start his journey, his time travel to the past. He only has to go through this entrance door, and he has learned on TV that the entrance door to a time travel was always black and white. You never thought about this, I'm sure, but we thought about these little things. So this is what we added to what we added. And also we can combine it. We have an important item. You can combine the history and time travel aspect together with the visualized provenance. And here you have some more examples. Simply, they are taken from our auction catalogues, from where else. So this is the concept Dieter and I was developing over the last 17 years. I would like to draw your attention on provenances, on background information and its impact, its possible impact on the demand and with the demand on the price of an item. And what it has to do with stamp auctions. And therefore, let's see if I get it, I would like to invite you to follow a 2 minutes and 22 seconds video and have a look at, there will be a block of 10 of penny reds, and just remind this when I will continue in 2 minutes and 22 seconds.
Provenance is a quality seal. As in art, it has become an indispensable aspect of valuable philatelic items. Over the years, Karl has put together a register card index that covers provenances on any important item. Practically all important items of the British stamps have been covered. Besides a picture, there is in-depth information on any history of any piece. For instance, you can find in which auction an item has been sold or how much it fetched, or also you can find in which other collections has an item been included. Sometimes even the fate of a piece can be traced. For instance, a large item has been divided into smaller items over the years and has been included in some other collections. The further back a family tree can be traced, the more value exists in this provenance for the collector and for his collection. It will probably never be possible to put together a card index with all important items, but surely we are convinced though that the register that we have here in front of us covers the most important items and is the most comprehensive for British philatelic rarities of the classical period, the one put together by Karl Louis.
Okay, so I mentioned, have a look at the block of 10 we were showing you. And incidentally, from this block of 10, which was original block of 13, this block of 10 was once damaged. It was cut into a block of 6, a pair, and a single. And we in Zurich were glad to get the single as a consignment. And we presented this single and its, I think, interesting philatelic history, where it comes from, on a double page. Whether it stands for or not, it's not the debate, but it finally realized a hammer of, it was estimated 1,500 Swiss francs, realized double the hammer price, the starting price, 3,000, which were at the time 2,550 pounds. And incidentally, within a very short period of a few months, the block of 6 from this original block of 10 came on the market, was offered the normal way, I would say, no provenance given, no background information given, presented on a page, and the block of 6 realized 3,500 hammer, which was an average of 600 pounds per stamp. So the only explanation we have is that we made the single much more interesting. We loaded it with emotions. This is the secret of the auctions of today. We have to load our stamps, our covers, our postmarks with emotions, and emotions with background information, with provenance information, with historic information. I am now at the end, and I will hand over to Jonas again, but let me summarize what we have seen so far or heard so far. Philately started as a hobby in the 1880s for an intellectual elite. I wouldn't say for the high society, but for the wealthy people, for the wealthy families, for the wealthy industrials. It was also the hobby of the kings, as you all know. And from about 1880 or so, 1880, 1890, it became for more than 100 years a hobby for everyone, for the people's movement. And from about 1990 or 2000, philately is not going back. Going back would be the wrong expression, but is performing back to its roots. It's becoming, over the last 20, 30 years, a hobby for the intellectual elite again. And Jonas has said, a new battle in philately. So this is where we are. This is where the auction houses for stamps and philately have to react on. And what I have shown you the last 15 minutes was our answer to this change in philately. Thank you.
Hopefully, not all of you agree about all interpretations. Like we said in the introductory slide, the perspectives Karl and I present today, they are our subjective perspectives. And this is, of course, the reason why we bring it forward like this, that it needs to be debated. But I am certain that one of the battles we need to fight in the very near future is where should this hobby go in the future? And this will, of course, affect the whole industry, which needs to be supportive to the hobby as well. And I believe that if we try to go forward in measuring the success of the development in quantities, we will go wrong. I think it is wrong to hunt for young people to collect stamps. In fact, we all know that if you should be able to develop your performances in this hobby, when you are in age 20, 30, 40, you have totally different priorities with your life, with your time, and possibly also with your money. We all know in this room that this hobby is a hobby related to a budget. Everybody, they have to put a budget. The only difference between the most common buyers is the number of figures in the budget. But even the one who spend most money, that person have a budget. So I would like to put some perspectives more on this subject, and let's see where it takes us later in the festival. So far, you should be aware of that. In fact, it took quite many years until we saw that auction catalogs took new characters. Like Karl explained with some selected examples, it took only almost 100 years until catalogs appear differently. In our own group of companies, you can see here to the right that the first single-owner catalog in the style many of you are used to get our pile of catalogs today. It was not until 1997 we presented the first catalog of this style. Of course, driven by the development in technique and also demand from collectors. Karl, he gave some primitive examples of the early time in philately, how people collected. They filled the spaces in the albums. And those were, of course, also the buyers in the auction. You needed only an explanation where the stamp fit an empty space in your album. Today's, I dare to say, even though you are not an exhibitor, even those collectors who collect for fun and never participate in the social context. After only 1 year in this industry, professional now, I have realized that even those collecting for the fun in the dark, they have a context they want to collect in. They are not only filling spaces. They have a context. They have no need to show it for others. But I want to give you some examples from those who actually are extrovert and show on exhibitions. And this is an exhibit page from a thematic philately collection about birds, and it is about the pigeon. At the bottom of the page, it is developing how the pigeon was used very early to forward mail, actually the first air mail example in the world. But the development of the page also include the other items to fill the page by explaining how the pigeon leaves with the message, deliver the messages, and turn it left and return home to its pigeon loft with the Colombier straightforward marking here, which is the same word for pigeon loft. So what I'm saying is that thematic philately have very much lead the way for the other disciplines as well to develop how we are collecting today. This is another example from postal history, where you can see that what Karl explained from the examples of auction catalogs, he wants to refer to not only emotions by including graphics and design itself in a style which, of course, is attractive. It actually is attractive. When I see this page in postal history, it is an invitation. Come and look. This is beautiful. What does he want to say? He only wants to share with me the information about this important cover from Norway to Italy. And besides, it is the most it is the highest ranking of the skilling period of Norway as well. And it is the same if you go to traditional philately. Traditional philatelists, they don't only collect a stamp filling a space. If you collect the 5-cent 1847 stamp from USA, the first stamp in USA, and want to have all the shades from brown to orange, this is one way to do it. So what Karl referred to in the primitive age of our hobby, one stamp, one space, one stamp, I believe that many collectors today, they have all something in common. They want to collect in a context, and this context is also applicable for how they want to be motivated to buy and meet the industry. And if I am right, I am saying something here. This is a hobby which now and in the future will be performed by an intellectual elite who actually wants to do something more than filling spaces. And we need to meet them on that criteria. One who have given a lot of thoughts about this is the leading auctioneer in the world, Scott Trappel, who managed Siegel Auction Galleries in New York. And he started to develop his thoughts and shared it with all of us, because this is available online. If you go to Siegel Auctions, you will find the catalogs, I will come back to later. But Scott Trappel at Siegel, he talks about that we now are in the 6th wave in the auction industry. And maybe some of you have thought about, when Karl talks about provenances, is that really applicable for the whole scale of our hobby? Maybe, maybe not. But what Scott does here in his article about the 6 waves is that he only referred to that the first wave was 1917, when Philippe von Ferrari dies, and subsequently his collections are sold. That is the Ferrari wave, or the first wave in the auction industry. When he sells his collections, the second wave starts. It means that King George V, Burroughs, Caspary, Green, Hind, and Liechtenstein, they start to buy. They are the second wave in the auction industry. When these guys dies or cease to collect, the third wave starts. It is in the time era between 1947 and 1955. And Liechtenstein, he dies 47, Caspary dies 55. And a mix of dealers and collectors, they start to buy. Boker, Lilly, Phillips, Rust. There are many names starting to buy. And when they cease to collect, the fourth wave starts in the 1960s and 70s, when Ishikawa and Erwan Haub, the German industrialist who lives in USA and America, and he starts to collect. Some other names as well. The fifth wave starts in the 1980s, when new collectors are starting to come to the market, and some stocks like Ishikawa's are sold. And when Scott Trappel in 2018 commenced the sales of Bill Gross collections, the 6 waves commence, and not only Gross, we have Besançon, Dubois, and of course Erwan Haub. They all belong to the 6th wave era, when these collections now have switched hands. And if you really look at the figures, philately, the industry, have never been stronger. People have never spent more money ever than in the 6th wave, buying all these stamps from these guys, Haub, Gross, Besançon, Dubois, and many others as well, of course, not to forget. So if we continue to measure our hobby in quantities, be careful, because I don't believe personally that those quantities apply so much going forward. It will remain an intellectual elite again. Look at how they collect, and look how we need to address them when we want to offer material for sale. So when Karl explains the necessity for a provenance, it is only to go back to what is explained in this one-page editorial note by Scott Treppel, the waves and who has had the stamps in the different wave. Who of you don't want to be the link in the 7th wave of provenances? Maybe. Okay. Karl have already explained for you that he and Dieter, they developed the house style our companies have operated within the last years. And like Karl also tried to explain, it is about emotions, but also to intellectually meet these target groups. Like I said, never in the history of this industry people spend more money in philately. And our house style is, of course, to document what these guys, these collectors have collected. We have our book series, which we recall as the Hall of Fame in philately. Sometimes it takes years in between the documentation, the book, and the sale. This example, it took 15 years between the collector published his book and the material came to the market. Imagine yourself how well established this marketing for his fine material was, and the prices, they were realized very good. It comes to auction and sell. This example, it was only 4 months between the publication of the book about the collection and the realization, the sales of the material. However, we cannot leave this presentation without appointing which catalogs are the best ever made. And these 5 volumes are the best ever made. If you ever should invest in old catalogs, you should have these 5 in your library. I can promise that you will have reading for the next 2 years if you have them.
These aren't old catalogues, these are fairly new catalogues.
These are very new catalogs, and they will be key for the future going forward. As you can see here, this is again referring to Siegel Auction Galleries in New York, and basically Scott Treppel himself, who is the managing director and president of his own company. These sales, they took place over 6 years, 2018 with the first sale, and only 2 weeks back, the latest sale, which I will come back to. But these 5 are the best ever made. Why? Because in my view, my interpretation, they combine all these elements together. If you didn't know who Bill Gross was, or is, because he is still alive, certainly, who he is, he was a keen collector over the last 30 years. As you heard me saying, he entered the market during the 4th wave of buying, and he was himself starting the 6th wave in selling. And in these catalogs, the mix of talking to emotions are in its perfection. Provenances, history of the lots and the items itself, and with a lot of philatelic knowledge given. This is only an example of one multiple of 16, which is presented not over only 1 page, but over 4 pages with its full description. It is much more than selling an item for maybe a lot of money. It is also to put it in the right context. Because no matter if my budget is like my budget on 2 or 3 figures, even for those with a budget on 7 figures, we all have one thing in common. It needs to be put into context. I need to know that the money I will spend, either it is £100 or £1 million, that the context is communicating to me or not. And this is one example of that. I just wanted to give you one of the reasons why we appoint these catalogs to be the best ever made. Regarding other census information in the catalogs, in the Siegel catalogs, they frequently give you a possibility to understand that the example on offer here and now, this is Scott 181. You can see that they give example on how the other 9 available stamps are related to the one now on offer. You can judge yourself if this is the one you should buy in regard of everything you assess, perhaps condition, quality, or whatever. And this is only one of, this is another example where the stamp on offer. Here it is another very rare stamp, Scott 194 USA. This is one of 15 available. Even though you can see that there are 16 reference examples, one is gray, indicating that this is not available. So you can see here on the third example, this kind of information, of course we cannot fill the catalogs by all this every time for every lot, but this is what Karl addressed as you need to communicate to the right target groups. And if I am right, if we are right, the target groups going forward, they are much more intellectual. I said in the beginning that you cannot talk about stamp auction catalogs without talking also about how they are used in its right context. And of course, I can only talk for where I am active, but the house style we have tried to represent here today is also applied by other competitors and other industry actors, as you see. I dare to say that the Siegel auction catalogs, generally, they are, for the US material, they are the best in the world, and I can stand for that. Our own house style, you have seen it developed by Karl. We try to operate in a network, and I believe that like we are here, a network, that is one thing which we have in common with how the collecting target group today move. They are, even though the hobby itself is introvert, it means that we sit home alone with our stamp collection, and that is the introvert side of being active in stamps. But then we come here to a meeting with 50, 60, 100 other collectors. That is the extrovert side of the hobby. And this mix is very important. And that's why we represent that we still are very traditional. We will not change how we perform auctions going forward. We will not switch to online-only presentations. We still believe in printed presentations of what we want to perform. If you ask very many of the people we meet, they say, if you present it digitally, I will not even read it. What not is visualized in the catalog, in the meaning it is not even illustrated with an image, the most primitive way to communicate emotions, they will not find it. And that is very important, because when I talk with you today here, I talk to all of you as collectors, as buyers. Because one day I know that you are a buyer who switch to be possibly a consignor. And as a buyer, look at these things when you buy and compare and ask yourself, am I affected or not? If the lot I am looking for not is illustrated or not. If it is not even illustrated, does it matter for you or not? 2/3 of the people I talk with, it matters a lot. They don't even find it, because many people, they only browse a catalog even though it is printed or online only, if it is not visualized. That is a fact. If you then need to add provenance, illustrations, etc., that is another thing. For all items, no, but for many items, yes. That is important. And we represent in our companies a perspective, a paradigm. The glasses we are operating our business is that we will remain traditional. If we need to save the future environment by not printing on paper and shipping with air carrier, we are not those who save the environment. We will continue to print, so buy shares in the industry for paper manufacturing. And we will continuously ship our catalogs the fastest way to our addresses, because if it goes 2 weeks and they have not received it, they start to call, where is my catalog? That is where the industry needs to be going forward. But as Karl have given some examples on when he was talking about his card index, of course also expertise is very, very important. Today, it is very dangerous to be a collector, because you need to feel that you either yourself or supported by the information in the catalog with certificates or the description only yourself, that it is correct. If you find out that the information not is reliable, even worse, if we should try to find new collectors for the 8 and 9 wave going forward, if these people who are willing to enter a hobby find out that they were cheated, they will lose confidence fast and leave this hobby. So we only say that we believe in this. We have invested a lot, for example, in technique, supporting to have correct descriptions of every lot, and that is our aim going forward as well. Secondly, the philatelists themselves, when we work with material, we take a lot of care with describing it with the right persons, to find the right person for the area to describe. And this is reflected, of course, also in what we need to perform in the presentation in the catalogs. To do this properly, we have invested the last 5 years in a digital database where we have now 2 million images digitally, so we can take your lot and scan it and use it within a second in our digital database and find the provenance, but not only the provenance. We can also see if the lot, your item, have been changed over the time. Very, very often we find out that something has been corrected in shape, corrected in appearance, in condition, compared to how it has been in the past. And if we not prohibit this, we will kill the future, because people willing to spend, they need to know that they are treated fairly. They rely very much in the trust the company perform only by the way they operate. So going forward, the mix in between having a traditional card index like the one Karl have for GB, we also have card indexes for Switzerland, for German states and Germany, and for Netherlands, but now also the digital database with the whole world. Like I have said, the introvert and the extrovert side of performing auctions is very important as well. We try to be traditional here as well, not only printing and shipping the catalogs physically, also to have auction events where we try to get people to attend. And by doing that internally, that's showing our customers we have a pulse in our business. We are not sitting dead in our office working with your stamp. We are actually live. We have a pulse. We have an activity going on in between these events. And when these events take place, you are welcome to our auctions. Either you sit there yourself in the auction room. This is photos from the auction 3 weeks ago only. Or you are in the telephone with us. Or you are via your agent. Or last time I hired a guy sitting a whole week following us through the webcam. So in the next Corin Fila newsletter, you will be able to read his 2-page article about following our performances through the webcam and giving his perspective from there, because that is also a way of participating if you are far away from Zurich and not want to come to us. But this hobby is based on 4 pillars. One of these pillars is to socialize together and meet each other in seeing each other in the flesh, and that is something the auction itself needs to contribute to. If we not do that, I am a strong believer in that the hobby will slowly die out. So now is the timing to go back to where we were in the past with very traditional formats. I am very conservative in that way. I also want to talk with you, I say it again, we talk with you today about, as with a perspective, you are all buyers. Be careful. You know, wars in the past, they have been fought very long time symmetrically. In the past, all wars, real wars, they were fought on battlefields, away from the society. No wars the last 40 years have been fought that way. All wars today, they are fought among us. The war in philately is like the other wars in the society. They are very asymmetric. I only want to address to all of you in the role of buyer. Be very careful, because what you believe possibly is a symmetric offer, offered symmetrically, is never anymore offered symmetrically. Why? Because we have accepted it to be developed that way. Now is the timing to change that, to take it back to something we need to go forward. And we need to go forward that people buying stamps, they can have and feel trust in this industry. Don't forget to read the most fine text, which possibly is not always the most easy way to find, the conditions of the sale. The conditions of the sale as a buyer anymore are not symmetrically. They are very different from company to company. If you compare conditions of sales as a buyer, some of them are very, very different than others. Be aware of this, so you not feel that you are cheated later on when it is too late. And I have only given some examples, some guidelines where to look for when you look for these asymmetries. Because in the first glance, it might look the same. I have met many people who collected 40 years, and suddenly they started a decision point to take a decision, should I sell or not? And the 40 years they spent to carefully collect this piece by piece, they spent only 30 minutes to compare two offers to each other and didn't think about all these asymmetries. And many of them regret that they didn't invest more time in actually finding out these asymmetries. So I decided, together with Karl, to give you some headlines to follow. Ask yourself when you find out that when you switched from a buyer reading the auction catalog as a buyer, and when you want to use the auction catalog, possibly to sell your stamps, what you should compare in the offers. That is what I want to say. And don't forget to read the fine text with very small font. Okay, I started by saying 1 hour ago that we wanted to develop this presentation to be something looking back to where we were from the beginning. I have tried to establish that the war in philately was because it was an intellectual elite taking a fight how to collect. And thanks to Pemberton, the war ended and everybody followed a way to collect, which is an intellectual way to collect, to study the stamps from a scientific starting point. Now, the time is again that the collectors are in an intellectual elite, collecting following a concept, even no matter if you are an exhibitor or a collector. We have given you a journey through how auction catalogs have changed through history. And if we should address the target groups collecting now, we believe, Karl and I, that traditional formats remains as very important, the printed format. We believe very much in talking to emotions. People are much more emotional today than in the past. 100 years ago, most people, they couldn't afford or even not dared to be emotional. Today, everybody take the risk to be emotional. When we talk with each other, we are much more willing to take conflicts, which of course also are wake up emotions among each other. Auction catalogs, they are not different. We believe that they need to talk to emotions. Be aware that the industry today, because of how the industry has evolved, and that is a talk for itself, not related to auction catalogs, so I will not go, we have not went into depth into that. but you need to be aware of that unfortunately the industry today is very asymmetric. And I have given you some headlines to follow. Karl and I, we have prepared this presentation for the first time, and we are open to talk with you about feedback afterwards, what we should have covered and possibly not. If you expected to hear us talking about online presentations, we didn't do that because we don't believe in that. That is my message. So I look forward possibly to the panel discussion later in the program to discuss this more. But I want to be very clear. We are not the companies who will save the environment by printing and shipping less. The more we print, the more we ship, the more our business are successful. That is a very clear statement, which I represent for 100%. Because this is not so complicated. This is about presenting something in a catalog, offer it in today's character, and sell it well. That was also the beginning of this industry, and that still remains as applicable. And besides being at the Royal, giving a paper is, for me at least, different than being everywhere else. I believe that this society, this place and this room should be the room in the philatelic world where we take the lead in how philately is developed in the future. So here in this room, we need to dare to accept that we might not talk about all questions for the whole hobby, but those questions related to those people we want to target and address. And when I joined this society, the Royal was not for everybody. It was for an intellectual elite who had a certain aim with his collecting. And we care about very many things. And one thing we care about is physical and printed formats. I collect these things, like these nice bindings, many of them house bindings of the original catalogs. And now when I am fortunate to work with this, I represent, of course, that will remain. That is important. And it matters. It makes a difference. And I want to make a difference. I don't make a secret of that. One intellectual question is, of course, should I collect them in their original presentation without the binding or with the binding? This is the never-ending discussion in between collectors. Some of you might like them bound. Some of you might bind new catalogs which not are bound, etc. I mean, we can make a science of that, but that can be another topic, James, for a future Crawford Festival. Which is most important? Or can we live with the reprint? This is the Ferrari catalogs. I showed you the examples of the original catalogs, not bound, the nice binding which were made contemporary. Sorry, not contemporary, it was made 50, 60 years after the auctions. And this is the reprint from 25, 30 years ago, 1990 somewhere. Thank you for the attention, and we have still 20 minutes for questions and answers. And Karl and I, we look forward to be challenged on some opinions, as I have not shown my green flag, but my black flag, printing and shipping. Maybe somebody feels provoked to say to you, Jonas, you are wrong. Even worse is when customers call me and say, Jonas, why do you pack the catalogs with all this plastic? Because we paid €250 for printing the catalogs and shipping the catalogs. If you get them damaged during transportation, I have not cared in my investment. So I use the best plastic I can find to protect it from water, damage, and mismanagement by the shipping company. FedEx. So I will pack my catalogs in the best plastic and wrapping around. Thank you.
I'll hit you with the first question then, Jonas.
Yes. And Karl, you also help me if I need.
Jonas,
Yes.
are we on? Hello?
Hello. Yes, we're on. Jonas, I was very interested in the Scott Treppel wave
Yes.
scenario, and you mentioned that the recent selling group was the 6th wave, and then later on people will become the 7th wave. It's a bit disappointing that maybe the 6th wave sellers are also not the 6th wave buyers to then become the 7th wave sellers. I know obviously some of them have deceased, but some of them are still alive, so it's a shame they've given up collecting altogether. Your thoughts on that?
But that's right. I mean, if I made it a little bit unclear, I mean, as if you followed which collectors were in which wave, you could see that the 4th wave, I will find it again, so I don't have it all in my head, but the 4th wave was actually Erivan Haub, for example, and he was the seller in the 6th wave. So it has been so also in Scott Trappel's theory about the 6 waves, that some buyers, they have survived one wave until they have sold, if that was what you meant. So I think that will be so that now we have seen the sale during the 6th wave. I am fortunate, I know who have bought during this 6th wave. If these buyers will be the sellers in the 7th wave or 8th wave, I don't know yet. I expect that we will see new sellers in the 7th wave. I can see a demand for buying if right things are on the market. And that reminds me that one thing which might not be so obvious for everybody, but as an auctioneer, we care most about the buyers, because the buyers are much more important as long as they want to buy, because we know that as long as we have buyers, you can always find somebody who have something to offer. Everybody who wants to offer something, the first question is, are there buyers now? Right, Karl? Yes. So to care about the buyers, that's why I address for you here. You are the buyers. Be a buyer as long as you want. And of course, I should have mentioned that I was fortunate to go to New York 2 weeks ago to follow the gross sale. I mean, I was there, I said to Scott, you are somebody I really follow carefully, and I have made so the last 10 years. And they sold 100 stamps of US Classic for 18.3 million. 18.3 million, including the premium, of course, 15.4 without the commission. It means a lot of money in average per stamp. And I was in the room, so I can tell you it was 34 different buyers. And these 34 different buyers, they were 2/3 online, 60% online, and 20 in the room or by telephone. Because I could follow the auctioneer saying which bidding number bought what, so I could see that the 100 stamps was bought by 34 different. So the market is strong. More questions, please, Peter.
Thank you. A most energetic presentation. Thank you very much. I'm very interested to know of what age they were. I think you've very adequately described the situation which you find today. But in my experience, the new generations which are coming through to create your intellectual elite are doing it with very much less paper than we did. Now, this is not a green issue. I think that's fairly immaterial. What I think is extremely important is, for example, the selling of newspapers in nearly every country in the world is now very, very much reduced because everybody reads them online. I don't mean everybody over 60, but I do mean everybody under 40. Therefore, when you get to your 7th, 8th, 9th generation coming through, wanting to be stamp collectors, I have grave doubts that they will be inured with the enthusiasm that you have for paper copies of everything and the presentations which you very kindly and very excellently made. I do think that without reference, I mean, you have made some references, of course, to the electronic world, in your favor, the people who bid online, they're kind of important. And you've also made the point that it would be very nice if the Crawford catalogues that are in the British Library were put online. It is this online that is the constant view now, I think, of anybody certainly under 40 and possibly under 50. So good luck with your printed catalogues. They're wonderful. They're holding up beds all over the country. But, and I mean that with the best possible kindness, but I do believe that by the time you get to your eighth and ninth generation, you will have to change along with everybody else.
I can only say that you started with talking about the age, and I implicitly I think I agree with you that saying that the middle age for our hobby is very high. Somebody said to me a few months ago that the American Philatelic Society, who are 23,000 members, I believe, they have 27 on 100 years and more, and the middle age generally in our hobby is very high. I have given a lot of thoughts the last year if that is good or bad. I don't see necessarily a problem that people who enter the hobby as new are 50, 55. I might see the vice versa, to adapt to that, because I believe it is wrong to try to get people in age 30, 40 to start to spend time and invest money in something they have another focus on in life at that time. I think that the focus they can allocate to a hobby like ours is much more favorable in age 50, 55. But I can be wrong. That will be a never-ending...
I'm sorry, I agree with you.
Yes.
But it's those who are coming up to those ages in 20 years' time who will not be educated in written words. They will be educated in electronic words.
Yes. The other thing you touched on was the physical format and presentations versus the digital. I have not said that I am against the digital. I see it as as an addition to the printed presentation. I mean, anybody working with us, they can intentionally say, I don't need the physical catalog, I need only the presentation. What I say, we don't give you as a consigner an alternative. Everything you consign with us will remain printed and presented in a catalog. We also offer as a printed presentation. I know some of you here who consigned your stamps and were waiting for the catalog, and suddenly you had to call for the catalog, and the company, but we sold your stamps 2 weeks ago, but I never got a catalog. No, because the material and the bulk of the material was only presented online and sold online. That is the difference I want to make clear. I mean, I have not said that I or the companies we operate are negative to new technique implemented. We have actually said to you, we have implemented all technique available in addition. What I'm saying, as a buyer of stamps, you will one day be a consigner, and the consigner, you are interested in the stamp auction catalog, what we are here to talk about. That's what where I'm saying. Be careful.
I'm going to speak here. I'm going to speak here as an individual philatelist rather than a curator of the British Library. But I want to give out a cautionary tale about digital publishing. As many of you are well aware, we've been the victim of a massive cyber attack last October, and as of today and for the foreseeable future, many of our digital publications are no longer accessible for researchers. That's 8 months in. We don't know when that's going to be online yet. I think that Jonas is right that we need more of a hybrid system, but there are solutions around like print on demand. But I think at the minute, given what's happened at the British Library, I would use that as a cautionary tale against being over-reliant on digital systems, especially because cyber attacks are becoming more and more prevalent. But it has knocked our organisation back significantly.
Yes, and I want to just say I agree with you. And again, as a buyer, the day you want to sell and is offered, of course, you get a printed catalog. Ask, will it be a digital print-on-demand edition for the 25 strongest buyers? Or, like we do, we print and ship 2,900 catalogs in a pile of 12 to everybody. For you, as a seller, it is a big difference if the 25 most valuable customers get a digital print-on-demand catalog or something for everybody. It's a big difference. This is one of the most dangerous asymmetries in the industry today, that what you believe is the same offer is not symmetric.
Yeah.
Yes? Please.
Some food for thought, as Peter mentioned, having possibly just online representations of physical things. As you touched symmetry or asymmetry, it came to my mind, as we still are selling physical things. And my new idea is that representing the physical things in physical printed catalogs, that's symmetric, and that matches nicely in my mind. You possibly not should be going to present NFTs in a printed catalog in future. That should demand a different format. But I could imagine that good quality philatelic literature and philatelic catalogs and auction catalogs and the postal history items or the stamps, they align to each other. Possibly we will not attract people who are digital only with this hobby on physical items. They might be collecting something different. But thinking about symmetry or asymmetry could give us some additional input in what to carry on or where to change. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you, can you, because who is in which order? You take care of that. Thank you. John?
Thank you, Jonas, for a stimulating presentation. You'll not be surprised to hear I was disappointed to hear that you think it's wrong to try and encourage young people into the hobby. Research has always indicated that people are most likely to collect stamps as an adult if they collected as a child, and most likely to return to the hobby when children or grandchildren show an interest. If we're saying that our new target market is the 50 to 55-year-old, how do you think the stamp trade is going to identify those people and market and promote to them? How is that going to be done to try and get this new intellectual elite into the hobby?
Well, I mean, thank you for asking this question, because if anybody leaves the room with the impression that I say we should not try to get young people to collect, that is not what I want to bring forward. I think it will be very difficult of many different reasons. But I know that where you have people with a soul fire like you, John, I mean, then it works to get people to be interested, and if they leave at a teenage and then they return. But what I believe we need to focus on, how should we adapt to the new time and get people in age group 50, 55 who never have had a relationship to stamp to start to collect stamp. And I believe that what Karl and I have covered here, the emotional focus is the right way. We need to talk about how our hobby communicates to the emotions among people. Some are interested in history or society or anything else. And my experience, not only from the last year, but from the last 30 years being involved in this hobby very much, like you all know, that quite works as well. I mean, many people, they have not ever used a stamp for a postcard in age group 50-20 today. They don't need to send a postcard when they are on vacation. They take a photo with a camera in the phone and they send it by text message all over the world. But I think, of course, there is a mix we need to adapt to, where we have people who can take care of young people and get them motivated into stamps. I know it works, and it will still work going forward.
And there's just time for one more, and that's John. I was just going to make the point that when I was growing up, I didn't know anybody who looked at family history and did research on family history. But today, you look at the number of people of our generation that are interested in family history and do the research. It's very similar to stamp collecting in a lot of ways, and how motivated we are. And I think what you're doing, providing the history around items in your catalogues, is absolutely the right way to go, to encourage people to do the research, to add to what you've done, and to learn from what you've done. And certainly that's what motivates me now. I used to be a one stamp of everything, and now I don't buy stamps by themselves. It's the postal history that I'm interested in, and the things that you don't know that I can find out that adds to what you know and what is presented in auction catalogues of the past.
Right, thank you very much. Thank you, Jonas. Thank you, Karl. Excellent, very good.